Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining this afternoon. As Amy said, my name is Marisa Bernstein. I'm a program manager at Code for Canada, where I run two programs, Civic Hall Toronto and GRIT Toronto. So GRIT is Code for Canada's inclusive user research and usability testing service. So I'm really excited to be here today to talk about some tips on running user research and usability testing sessions and doing it remotely while still being as inclusive as possible. So a little bit about me. My background is in community engagement and urban design. And as Amy mentioned, several years ago, I co-founded a startup. And now I'm a PM at Code for Canada. And I guess you could say, I sort of meandered my way into tech and into civic tech. A little bit about that startup. It's called Projexity, and we ran it from 2013 to 2016. So it was a platform to crowdsource resources for small-scale urban improvement projects and better engage communities in that process. So we made a lot of mistakes. This is a startup event, so I feel like it's important to talk a little bit about my experience there. The biggest mistake we made, for sure, was not validating our assumptions well and not understanding our users. So those mistakes, sort of ultimately proved to be the downfall of the company, like so many other startups. So, we had some major misconceptions about user research and testing. Feel free to let me know in the chat box if you've ever said or thought any of these things when it comes to research and testing. What's the point of doing it? We have no time to do this. We have tight timelines. We have to build the product. I tested the site internally. I had my co-founder look at some things. We fixed some bugs. That's that. We're done. So no, that doesn't count. And for us, we had no idea how to even do this stuff. Even if we really understood the importance of doing user research, like really understanding our users and doing the usability testing that was needed, we had no idea where to start. So I just wanted to give you this backstory because I feel like it's probably pretty common, at least from other founders that I've spoken to over the years. And I eventually became an advocate and then sort of, I guess, an expert on research and testing and doing it inclusively. So that's what I'm here to share with you today. So here's our agenda for the next 55 minutes or so. I'm going to talk about GRIT Toronto and talk about, what is usability testing and what does it mean to do it inclusively and why that's important. I'm going to run through a quick case study to sort of show it in action, and then give some tips about doing all of that remotely. And then hopefully we have time at the end for Q&A, but feel free to ask, I'll sort of pause in between these sections, but feel free, this is really informal. Feel free to ask questions, and Amy will be watching the chat box too. So GRIT Toronto is a program of Code for Canada. And our founding partners for GRIT were City Tech Collaborative, which is a civic tech organization out of Chicago, Sidewalk Labs, and Civic Hall Toronto. So a little bit about Code for Canada. If you've never heard of us, we are a national civic tech nonprofit launched in 2017. If you've ever heard of like Code for America, Code for Japan, Code for Pakistan, Australia, they're all over the world. We kind of joined that team, that network of Code Fours. And so our mission is to build digital capacity inside of government, as well as civic capacity in the tech and design sectors. And the way we do that is through the various programs that we run. So we run a fellowship multiple times a year where we embed teams of three, a dev, a PM, and a designer into government to work on a challenge. And they're usually in there for 10 months. And it's a great opportunity to get a feel for what it's like to work in government. And it really trains up the government team to do their work more innovatively and collaboratively. We also have an education program where we offer trainings and other sorts of webinars. Civic Hall Toronto, which is another program that I run, is a Toronto-based program modeled after an initiative out of New York called Civic Hall. So we work with government teams mostly within municipalities, mostly Toronto, a little bit outside, and startups and folks in the tech and design sector who want to work collaboratively to solve civic challenges. And then there's GRIT Toronto, and that's what we'll be talking about today. So GRIT is an acronym. Who doesn't love a good acronym? It stands for Gathering Residents to Improve Technology. So that's pretty much what we do, and it launched January of 2019. So we work with teams in the public and private sectors to help plan, design, and run usability tests and user research of digital. We test digital prototypes, products with a diverse group of residents. Excuse me. So we've worked really hard to craft a model of inclusion, which I'll talk about what that looks like in a bit. And we really focus on inclusivity and delivering a strong, positive experience for participants. And here are some organizations, both within government, private sector, as well as nonprofit that we've worked with. So before we go into all of that, on the left is a recruitment flyer that we used when we first launched GRIT. And on the right is our pool of testers. We call them participants. And that's the map. So each yellow dot represents a participant. That's Toronto. And, of course, our community participants are more than a dot on a map. They're real everyday people with unique stories, experiences, behaviors that make them who they are as individuals. And they all approach and use technology in a different way with their own, sort of triumphs and challenges. So, but really what binds them is that many of them need to access the same products and services, whether that's a government website or an online banking app. And, since there may have different challenges or strengths, it's really important that any kind of public facing technology, whether it's through government or it's through a company, really important that we get everyday people to weigh in on that technology. So, the only way you're going to build tech that works for everyone is to talk to a diverse group of people. That way you learn things you really never would have otherwise. So I'll probably say this a bunch of times during the next hour, but really it's technology that includes everyone, especially on the edges, ensures that what gets built will work for everyone. And so when we did our recruitment to gather these residents, we did it all offline. We put up posters like the one you see on the left all over the city, places that like real people go, coffee shops, laundromats, community centers, libraries, outside of subway stations, you name it. We wanted to stay off the internet and off email listservs intentionally so that we don't just get the kind of like really engaged, super high tech folks. So let's dive into inclusive usability testing. So what's usability testing? It is the process by which you engage the users of your product or service in order to ensure that the technology is working well for them, that it's user-friendly, that its purpose is clear, that it won't glitch out. It's an important part of building technology, and if you don't do it, you never learn the ways in which to improve your product, which is crucial. That's especially true for technology that's meant to serve a large public audience. And trust me, a lot of products and services are not tested. I'm totally guilty of that when I was running a startup. And, or people do the testing with their colleagues or friends, and there's a huge bias in that, obviously. So usability testing has been around for a long time, but its traditional model is problematic, and I'll show you why. Unfortunately, most usability testing services facilitate user testing sessions in this exclusionary way. So what that looks like is typically conducted in, like a sort of downtown office tower or windowless lab kind of situation, which is intimidating and cold. So like something like this kind of thing. They typically happen during 9 to 5 working hours, which really excludes a lot of people who might not be able to leave work to participate. And traditionally, the people that are brought in to participate are sort of like seasoned focus group participants. They kind of sign up for all these services and go from one focus group kind of thing to another. And, you know, a lot of these relationships are transactional. They're not based in trust. They're sort of less human, and they might be biased, especially if you're doing like in-house testing. So all of this leads to a less representative group of testers, less authentic feedback, and less inclusive products ultimately. So now let's look at the civic-focused model of inclusion, which was pioneered by folks out of Chicago called Cut Group, which I think I'll talk about in a little bit. And this model is all about the people, the participants, and making sure they feel safe, comfortable, and respected at all times. So typically, you know, GRIT operates on this model, and we do, well, pre-COVID, we did all of our tests in community centers and libraries, places that are comfortable, typically close to transit, safe, places that are a little bit more relaxing than, let's say, an office, downtown office tower. We try to do all of our sessions after working hours or after 9 to 5. Most people work those hours, so we can allow more people to participate. And the who is, you know, thinking about that map that I showed a few slides ago, is that diverse group of residents, diversity across demographics and behaviors and lived experiences. And so we work really hard. We really focus on building relationships with our participants. We have, you know, almost 400 of them, but we recognize that they are all individuals. And so we, you know, it's all based on trust and empathy for us. So this helps them to feel that safe, comfortable, and respected feeling. And when people feel those things, you know, they feel like they're being treated as humans, and they're more likely to be relaxed and give really great, authentic feedback on products and services. So all of this leads to more representative group of testers, more authentic feedback, as I said, and ultimately more inclusive products. So this model is everything, and why that is, you know, when you test with a diverse and often underrepresented group of people, you learn things you never would have otherwise. Technology that includes everyone, especially on the edges, ensures that what gets built will work for everyone. So this model really amplifies voices from different demographics, lived experiences, and behaviors. So a lot of the folks that we have in our group, of course, reflect this diversity. So we have people all ages from 18 to 65 plus, from you know, all backgrounds, newcomers, first, second, et cetera, generation, various identities, abilities, household incomes, tech skills, kind of you name it. And so here's a bit more on how to be inclusive. So I always recommend, our program GRIT was modeled after this Cut Group program out of Chicago. Cut stands for Civic User Testing. I recommend reading up on that. There's also a group out of New York called Design Insight Group. We always, you know, recommend recruiting offline. And in places where sort of everyday people go, and, you know, staying off of Twitter and email listservs. Trying to recruit a group of participants who represent the diversity of a given location. We always recommend compensating fairly. We always compensate participants. We try to do $1 to $1.25 per minute. Pre-COVID, because all of our sessions took place in person, we always reimbursed very generously, I think $40 per round trip for our participants, because oftentimes they were coming from the far reaches of the city, and we wanted to make sure that they felt like they had a convenient and safe option to transit. We always offer tiered consent to participants. I'll talk a little bit about consent and consent forms a little bit later. But basically this is, you know, trying to meeting participants where they are in terms of their comfort around documenting their feedback, their session, capturing video. Is it with, you know, face forward, or is it a camera off, or is it like on the side? There's a lot of different ways to do consent. It's all about what people feel comfortable with. And we always recommend, and we always try to do this ourselves, is share findings for as much as we can from each engagement we do. that's kind of a Code for Canada thing, is then we share, I'll try to share lots of learnings and working openly. And finally, and of course, this is a big one now, is offering a way to participate remotely. We tried to do that pre-COVID, and now, of course, we're completely operating remotely. So I'm just going to run through a case study of a sessions we did about a year ago with a Toronto-based nonprofit called Ample Labs, and this is for an emergency social services web app called Chalmers Bot. So Ample Labs came out of the civic tech scene here in Toronto. And they built this chatbot called Chalmers that helps people who are experiencing precarious housing to find emergency social services like free meals, shelters, mental health assistance. So prior to launching this beta app, Ample Labs did some testing with, particularly with youth that had experienced homelessness, and that helped to inform the sort of first iteration of the product. But they knew before releasing a beta that they would need to do some more research and testing with other sort of subgroups of those who experience homelessness. So through Toronto Civic Tech Community, we connected with them and learned about their need to do some more testing. So the research and testing objectives for this collaboration, this was their fourth round of testing. Excuse me. They were really keen on assessing the usability of this beta version with people between the ages of 18 to 44 who have had current or past experiences with precarious housing. So less about chronic homelessness, but more about couch surfing, basically without a stable place to live, and to really understand those people's journeys and how they have in the past accessed social services. And sort of like what their experience was with that. And of course, to do, the usability testing to ensure that the app they have built is functional, accessible, and user-friendly. So the methodology around recruitment that we used was our pool of participants, they're all residents of Toronto. So we were looking for people who had that very specific experience with homelessness, the precariously housed, and looking for the age and gender diversity, and age within 18 to 44. And people, like I said, who have and haven't used social services, and including people who've tried to access emergency social services but haven't been able to. So the format of the test, this was devised with Ample Labs, looked like 45 to 60-minute sessions, usually closer to 60, where we had one person facilitating, one from Ample Labs team observing and note-taking, and then one participant. So in total, that we did it one cold evening back in February, 6 participants. There was a screen recording, and the flow of the sort of test was we kind of generally do this kind of flow where there's the welcome, making people feel really comfortable, explaining what is usability testing, and all of that stuff, and then kind of diving a little bit into the usability of the app. So looking at the homepage and asking questions, and then running the participant through a series of tasks to see how they can complete them or not. And then finally, a bit of participant journey, which is really the research component. And we tried to push for all of our clients to include this in their testing. And this really gets to the why. Like you can, it's great to see how people are using, how people operate with these tasks that they get, if they're successful or if not. But understanding who the participants are and their lived experiences really gets to that like more qualitative data around maybe why did they use this task, or sorry, why did they go through this task the way that they did. And then we always sort of overall do an overall impressions at the end and wrap up, and always ask, allow the participant to ask us any questions. So for this engagement, this was obviously very sensitive topics. we recognize that participants could be currently in some sort of housing crisis or other. And so we actually had a member of our team from Code for Canada who had worked as a social worker previously. So we had her kind of on hand the entire evening. So just in case someone had some questions or needed some extra services, we had her, and we had other resources at the ready to either direct them to a shelter or to any other sort of resource that they would need. And we thought about, when we designed the test flow for this, we thought about how do we make participants feel really at ease and really comfortable, because it's such an extremely sensitive topic and we're strangers to them. And so what we did was really do the usability testing first and kind of really warm up and really focus on the technology, get people talking, develop a rapport, and then sort of dove into those more personal questions and let the participant lead on that. So some of the takeaways from this particular engagement were there were challenges faced by newcomers that in using the app that the Ample Labs team hadn't anticipated before. So doing the testing really surfaced some of those very specific needs to newcomers, people who didn't know the city or whose language or first language wasn't necessarily English and had trouble navigating the app. So that was a big learning for the Ample Labs team. They've then since made modifications to the app with. There were other sort of feedback around the look and feel of the app. There was a lot of really great insights about that and navigation. And those are sort of a lot of the big sort of takeaways from most engagements with usability testing is ways to improve that. So you're free to check it out if you go to chalmersbot.app. They've since made a couple of iterations, but they're still going strong. They've actually expanded outside of Toronto. I believe they're in Hamilton and another smaller municipality outside of Toronto as well. So, how do you do all of that remotely? And actually, before we go into this, I'll pause here for any questions. And to take a drink of water.
Idea. If you have any questions or comments, just pop them in there now, or we can come back at the end for them as well. So no rush.
Yeah,
even though I was kind of rushing you.
Cool. So I'll just go on. So how do you do all of that remotely? The Ample Labs engagement, so many of our previous engagements were predicated on this positive experience for participants in a physical, in-person, eye contact kind of context. So, if you'd asked me several months ago before the pandemic if GRIT was set up to do the work we do remotely, I would have said no. Definitely not. It was not really something we had talked about. And so, one of the first questions was, well, should we even do this? And so, let's talk about that. We've thought about this a lot on our team. So why now might be a good time to do testing? So of course we're in the middle of this this pandemic. There's a lot that's unknown still and uncertain. But what we do know is that research and testing, can still happen. I know that because we've done over 40 one-on-one sessions since the pandemic hit in mid-March, and we all became remote. And we really feel like we're still able to engage residents in that inclusive way and make them feel respected and comfortable. And like I said earlier, when people feel that way, they really engage with interviewers or facilitators and with the prototype that they're testing in a more meaningful way. So the data from these sessions has been really rich, really authentic, and that's led to the teams that we work with building better products and services. So product timelines also may have slowed down as a result of the pandemic. And so now is a good time to take that step back and to do some testing as well, to build that into your cycle. Residents also might have more flexible schedules. Of course, that's not the case for everyone, but many people are working from home and are able to jump on a session perhaps during the day, in addition to the evening sessions that we always offer. Residents who might not have been able to attend before, for various reasons, maybe the location was too far to get to from them when we were doing them in person, or it was just too inconvenient, they might be able to attend now. And a bit of extra cash in tough times never hurts. And, this is also a good distraction for people too. So in some ways it does feel like a good time to be doing more work like this. And so our first remote test, we actually had sessions scheduled for the evening of March 11th. Code for Canada was running a really big, our kind of annual summit that we had been preparing for months and months. And I was going to co-facilitate some GRIT sessions that evening. There was lots of, here in Toronto, lots of uncertainty about, what was going on. Are we all going to go on lockdown or not? But we were still all in person at this event. And the client that we were working with, they felt uncomfortable doing the sessions in person that we had previously scheduled to be in a physical location. So a few hours before we were set to run them, we sort of called it and said, okay, we're going to go remote. And we spent, instead of attending the summit that I had helped the team plan, spent it in like the green room, scrambling to adapt all of these sessions to remote and getting in touch with the participants and everything. But actually the participants were kind of relieved that they didn't have to go anywhere in person, and that really helped to set the tone for everyone being on the same page. We definitely don't have it all figured out, even though we've been doing these remote for months now. There's really, really big things that we're thinking about. And one of those things, of course, is the digital divide and people not having access to devices or to the internet or whatever it may be. I should note that when we were doing sessions like the one we did for Ample Labs, we had devices that we would let people test on in case they didn't have a smartphone or a laptop. But now they were remote, we didn't know how we could offer people access to those things. And of course, building trust over devices and through screens, it's, I think it could be done, but and we're all sort of used to it by now, but in the beginning, yeah, it was a little bit weird. It's just a very different to ask people such personal questions as part of the user research component through a screen without that kind of in-person vibe was difficult, and still is at times. It's something we're definitely thinking about, as well as accommodating those with disabilities. We've done a few sessions in person before the pandemic with people who have various disabilities. We're by no means the expert in that. We do our best, and we do our best to learn how we can best accommodate folks. And then, of course, since the pandemic hit, we're even more committed to finding ways for people with all abilities to participate. And so we have run a few sessions where people who do experience disabilities have been able to participate remotely. So a lot of it is working with them to see what works, what doesn't work, and as far as technology and communication and things like that. So I'm going to go over our sort of like top 10 tips about running testing and user research sessions remotely. I guess we'll go over tip number 1. Sorry, I just lost my place. Build a go or no-go framework. So this is sort of what I was talking about before. It's we weren't sure if we were going to do these remotely, or if we were, how are we going to make that decision? And so we ended up building a sort of framework, and we kind of run every new opportunity through this framework to see, yes, we will do this one remotely. So there's some factors to consider here. One, it's a team mindset and capacity. So I've talked to other, that CUT group in Chicago and other similar groups that I had mentioned earlier, are like, oh, are you guys doing testing remotely? Did you just pivot to remote like we did? And a lot of them actually aren't. And it's interesting that there are different mindsets and priorities that have come out since then. So the teams that aren't, said that they really want to focus on planning right now. And for us, it made more sense, especially because we had some sessions scheduled that we didn't want to cancel. We were kind of like, the show must go on. And so that was a big thing. And of course, capacity to make sure that we had necessary resources on our side to make it happen. The testing schedule, can you pull off the logistics? Basically, we had some tests scheduled months in advance, and we were kind of, wondering if we were able to continue with those. This is like the biggest one, is the participant experience, like making sure that that we can provide a great experience for our participants. And that the inclusivity principles, can we be inclusive in our recruitment for each engagement? And then of course, like what you're actually testing. So we've done some sessions pre-COVID with paper prototypes. And obviously, we couldn't do those remotely. So that would be, really difficult to do. Maybe not impossible, but so a big thing was like, what are we actually testing? Tip number 2 is picking the right tool for the job. So there's lots of different software out there. We're all becoming like really familiar and pros with all of these. So my advice is just choose something that you're super comfortable with when doing sessions, or try to find something that has like different capabilities around doing face-to-face or a screen share, audio, video. The recording aspect is really important. Chat and also the ability to phone in rather than to participate by video has been important for some of our participants. So we've been using Google Hangouts Meet and some other tools such as Envision for prototype testing, and Optimal Sort for card sorting exercises. So of course, test all of the tech ahead of time. We all know that now. Be ready to troubleshoot. We all know that too. I don't think I've run in the 40 plus sessions we've done in the last few months. I don't think there's been one that's just like completely went off without a hitch. There's always something, as we all know. And so just, kind of be prepared, have that expectation. Tip number 3 is sort of related to that, actually, like think through your flow in multiple circumstances. So think through the what ifs. This enables you to be more flexible and think on the fly. Like, what if people can't join by video? Can you still run the session if their video doesn't work, for example? What if they planned on using a laptop but it's not working and then they have to switch to a smartphone? Like, what are the implications of that? So just try to think about those things beforehand. So participant experience, which I've probably said many, many times so far, is everything. And this is the guiding principle for us. So the next few tips are around this. Tip number 4 is send simple instructions to join. Whenever we communicate with our participants, and it's always in really clear, plain language, we communicate with them well in advance. We send confirmation emails to them. And, instructions to join remotely can be a little bit confusing for some folks, especially if they're not very familiar with technology. And so it's just really important to make sure that they have time to read through and to ask any questions that they might have. Always confirm the time with them. We do that multiple times leading up to the session. We send all of the links, phone numbers. I always add my phone number too, in case they have questions and they just want to hop on the phone. And then consent forms as well. Tip number 5 is offer day and evening slots. Basically accommodate people's schedules. Book a few extra slots and anyone who's going to be on the session, other observers from the client team or from another stakeholder group. Always just book off extra slots because people might cancel or might need to reschedule last minute. If they do need to reschedule, which it happens, just be empathetic because we're all going through it right now. And always recommend that to keep it to no more than 3 sessions in a day, even if it's just a half hour sessions. Most of ours are around an hour, but it's very exhausting, kind of like having these conversations, concentrating, or if someone's note taking, it's a lot of effort for that task as well. So just be prepared for that. And really by the third one, you're kind of done for the day anyway. Tip number 6 is show up early. Just like you wouldn't make someone wait in real life if you're meeting them somewhere, show up early, don't make them wait. Tip number 7, again, just as if we were in real life, introduce everyone in the room. I know it's kind of a really basic thing, but sometimes, I've been in meetings where I see someone's initials and I'm like, who is this person? They have to introduce themselves and I have no idea what's going on. So we always, at the first thing is greeting people and saying like, this is so-and-so, they're from the city, or this is so-and-so, they're the client team and they're just going to be observing. So just stating, their first name and their role and sort of why they're in the room, even if they're muted the whole time. So we ask in our questionnaire, when we send out to when we have a new engagement, we send out the opportunity to our participant pool. We always ask if they would feel comfortable having people observe their sessions. A lot of our sessions are about pretty sensitive topics, and so we want to make sure that they feel comfortable. So we always give them that option to be like, no, I don't feel comfortable having someone from the city observe this, or having someone from this client group or this bank, whoever the stakeholder or client might be. So we never, not choose people based on their answer. We just want to make sure that when we are scheduling, that we don't schedule observers in for. Tip number 8 is, just be a nice human. Just like anything these days, we're not just working from home, we're working from home in a pandemic. We're not just engaging users or doing usability testing, we're doing it during a pandemic. So just a few tips around, remote conversations can be a challenge since the natural rhythm of a conversation can be lost. And there's like the tech delays or the mute, you're on mute, no, I'm not, that kind of thing. It's a sort of general difficulty of reading cues through a screen. So this makes it doubly important to encourage people to share their thoughts. So just, ask how your participant is doing, anticipate any triggers given the crisis and given the content of what you're going to be talking about with them. Just be encouraging and gentle if there are long pauses in the conversation. And of course, have resources on the ready just in case people might need it, either related to the pandemic or related to the content of the session. Tip number 9 is distractions will happen. So just pause and resume. Kids, pets, fire alarm. Like, I don't know if anyone heard, my cat was just scratching on my door for like 5 minutes. There's just distractions from many of us working from home. So if this happens and your participant gets thrown off, just help them refocus, repeat the last thing that they had said so they don't have to, and kind of go from there. And lastly, tip number 10, talked a little bit about compensation earlier, but we always recommend compensating fairly and quickly. So fairly for us means $1 to $1.25 per minute. We aim for compensating participants within 24 hours of them completing their session. We try to do e-transfers, but if someone doesn't do online banking or doesn't know, doesn't feel comfortable, doesn't know how, we always find a way to compensate them. And bonus tip, embrace the unexpected and beautiful. So back in May, we had a session. We were doing a usability test with the City of Toronto. We had a session at 7:30 in the evening. And, during that time, a few months back, I don't know if they did this in Victoria or wherever you are right now, but it's a time when a lot of people go out on their balconies and outside and like bang pots and pans for support of frontline workers. And so we were in the middle of this evening session. I was facilitating, a colleague was note-taking, and the participant was there testing a prototype. So we were in 3 different parts of the city actually, but we could all hear the noise through each other's computers and outside our own locations. So, we sort of talked through it, But then we just stopped and listened for a minute. And then we talked about frontline workers, and the participant actually revealed that he had been working for the Postal Service and going into work each day. And, we thanked him for his service, for doing that essential work. And then the banging stopped, and then we continued on with his session. So it was a really beautiful moment of connection when so many of us have felt or still feel disconnected. So it kind of reminded me of why we do this work, and just wanted to share that story. So I'll pause for questions. I just want to put my email here if anyone has questions afterwards. But yeah.
Also just added in the chat so that people have an archive of it.
Okay, great.
Yeah, because you can actually come back in here and see all the comments.
So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Marisa, for sharing your knowledge, all the useful tips, and the experience you have on the importance of usability testing. I really like that it focused on diversity and inclusion, and you've also included on how to achieve all of this as well. Excuse me.